Hi, I'm Terry Pearce from Untold Play, and this is video number 3 in my series on learning from games. Today I'm going to be talking about a game called Slay the Spire, which is an addictive little computer game based on two concepts, deck building and power-ups, which I think we can learn from and take into learning games and gamification for learning. So I'm just going to set up a game here of Slay the Spire, and I'm just going to choose a character here. I'm not going to go through all of the different mechanics involved in the game, because I'm going to focus in particular on the deck building element. So it does have lots of meaningful choices, which are great. So they give people a chance to feel that it's really their game, and they have options which make a difference to how their character progresses through the game. But the thing I want to focus on in particular is this mechanic with the cards. So we have 5 cards in my hand, and these cards do various things. So this is my character here, and these are my opponents, and each turn I take 5 cards from my deck of cards. So you start with a deck of 10 cards. Here are 5 of them in my hand, and here are 5 of them ready to still be drawn. So these 5 cards can do various things. They can attack, they can defend. Again, I'm not going to go into too much depth about the mechanics of that, but let's just start using a couple of them. They each have a cost, and I can spend up to 3 each turn on playing cards. So I have a hand of 5. Because each one costs 1 to play, I can only play 3 of them in my turn. So I'm going to attack with this one. It's going to deal 6 damage to this guy, and then another one here, deal another 6 damage. So that's 2 of my 3 cards played, and the other one here I'm going to use to defend. That gives me some block, which is going to defend me against his attack that he's about to do. So I've used up all my power. I can't do anything else this turn. I have to end my turn. And what that does is discards those 2 remaining cards. So you'll see those go over here to the discard pile. And then the enemies have their turn. So he's attacking me, but I've defended against that. And then I get a new turn. So I get my 3 power to play cards replenished, and I get my hand replenished from my deck. So I drew my other 5 cards. So now I can start to play those. So I'm going to play that to attack this, and that to attack this. Again, don't worry too much about the exact mechanics that are happening here. You're probably seeing the different damage that's happening here. You can kind of see the kind of thing that it is. It's just me trying to deal enough damage to take these opponents out, and then they get their turn and they get their chance to do things. But the interesting thing is, because you're drawing from your deck all of the time, your deck is, the limits of what you can do in the whole of this combat. But then your hand each turn is randomized from that deck, and that gives you the options for this particular turn. So if I keep drawing, then eventually all hands that are in my deck all cards that are in my deck are going to come through my hand. And if I keep playing enough of them and the right ones, then I can win the combat. The really interesting thing about this is that it's a deck building game. So although I start with those 10 cards, I get a chance after each combat to build my deck further. So as well as getting some rewards like gold, which I can spend later, I get to add a card to my deck, which is where it makes it a deck building game, because now I'm going to have 11 cards in my deck, and if I get a really good one, then I'm going to improve the quality of my deck. Which is a really interesting mechanic, because over time in the game you can earn more and more cards or buy more and more cards, and your range of options changes and improves. And this card, so I'm getting a choice here between these 3 cards. And again, I'm not going to go into enough depth that you really understand how great these cards are, but for instance this one deals 13 damage, whereas my previous cards could only deal 6 damage at most. So different things here, and as you go through the game you get even better cards as options to add. So I'm going to add this one, which costs more to play but is definitely really useful and makes my deck much better. So now if I go into my next combat, then I've got 11 cards here, and this straight away is in my hand, and I've got much more of an opportunity to do something useful to my opponent. So this is building my deck, and also these extra cards are kind of power-ups. And I think that's a really important concept, even outside of deck building games. A power-up is anything you give to the player where it improves their ability to do more things further on in the game. So it's not like an achievement where you just say, well done, you know, you defeated 10 opponents and you get a little badge. It's something that they can actually then use and put into action. And lots of games, particularly video games, do that really, really well. So these two ideas, deck building and power-ups, I think can be really useful for learning games. They're really motivational. People like to build this idea of a deck, and that's their pool of resources, and they get a sense of ownership of that deck. But also the power-up really particularly makes people want to see what that power-up can do. So they can start to say, okay, I've got this extra card. I really, really want to now rush in and do another round, another turn, another combat in this game, and see what that card does and see how well it makes me more able to overcome my opponents. So that kind of power up can be really motivational, particularly if there's any kind of pause, if you're then waiting for your next turn and you want to keep them motivated and thinking and planning, or even if it's a game that's played over different times, it's not all in one kind of sitting. Power-ups can work really well because they'll be motivated to come back and carry on playing. So these ideas of deck building power-ups, I think you could use in any kind of learning game, or perhaps even gamification. I'm designing a motivation game right at the moment where players use cards to motivate their team in a kind of work setting, and that they build the cards that are at their disposal by taking on new cards, and that kind of keeps them motivated is the idea. Is a way of kind of having a power up, so you get a new motivational technique to add to your range of techniques. I can think of plenty of other kind of topics, kind of corporate learning topics or educational topics, where you could use this as well. So for instance, if you built a game, a learning game, or some kind of gamification around resilience, you could use resilience techniques that people could power up their deck with in order to then apply them to new challenges. The same, for instance, with productivity techniques, that if you were facing players with a challenge of having to do more work or better work or be more productive, then the techniques they could use to manage their workload could be represented, for instance, by cards in a deck building game, and then they could use those new cards that they got as power-ups, and that would be really motivational for them to see how they could implement that. So I think there's lots of opportunities there. And I think it's just a really interesting thing to explore. And I encourage people, if they are looking to learn from real life games, to just play them and see how they work. And Slay the Spire is a great one for that, because it's available as a PC game, but it's also available as an Android game or an Apple iOS game. So it's something that you can very easily have a little play around with. And be inspired by. And that's one of the great things I think we can do to learn from games, is to be inspired by actually playing them. So I hope that's been useful. I'd really love you to comment on the video, or even better, subscribe to the channel. I'd really love to hear what you think, or your suggestions on other ways we could use these techniques of deck building and power-ups. I've been Terry Pearce at Untold Play. Thank you very much.